In today's episode of the Pathway Presents podcast, I'm with Jeremy McDonald. He's the managing director at Kaizen, and Kaizen stands for Creative Digital Growth. And today we're going to be talking all about, what Kaizen is all about, how they're supporting their clients in their growth strategy, and also how Jeremy thinking about growth for Kaizen. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Cool. So give us, the 360 overview. Like, what is Kaizen all about?
Yeah, Kaizen is a digital marketing agency, full service across multiple channels. We specialize in digital channel strategy, so finding out for clients how they can grow their audience and traffic to their site, channel implementation across our key services of SEO, digital PR, influencer, and paid media. And Kaizen as a term means continuous improvement, and we try and embody that in everything we do, from the way we approach content development through to the strategies we use for our clients. Our client base, fundamentally, it's quite mixed. So we work with large household brands such as Adidas, Compare the Market, IG Group, through to smaller startups. And yeah, the services that our clients buy from us are different depending on client, but fundamentally, the goal of everything we do is to drive more traffic to our clients' websites and help them convert or engage with whatever they're doing, or drive awareness.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, tell us a little bit more about the types of companies you're working with. You mentioned it sounded like it runs the gamut a little, but maybe tell us a little bit more. Is that sort of, like software companies, service companies, who is reaching out, or e-commerce even?
Yeah, it tends to be a mix in between e-commerce and also service companies. So Compare the Market is a comparison tool for insurance or various different products. The key people that buy some of the sort of digital PR services we do are people that are in very highly competitive verticals. They may be there, people are established and the product's established, so people are always searching for car insurance, so therefore they need to rank higher. And on the other side of the spectrum, some of the e-commerce stuff, such as Adidas I mentioned, fundamentally, it's a similar thing for them. They need to perform better in terms like yoga leggings and other stuff like that. So we do targeted SEO to support that, to help them rank higher and drive more traffic. And from the startup scale, it differs. We tend to build very, very tailored packages for them to say, your goal is I want to drive awareness. And we lean into a multiple different range of tools, from influencer marketing through to paid social, to try and drive awareness or make them more present. So it does vary, and we tend to try and be bespoke with what we recommend and how we approach it for the clients based on their needs.
Makes sense. And who would be typically reaching out? Is that like a founder, or is that more like a CMO that needs a bit of support and a further push for their marketing initiatives? Like, what's the sort of the typical individual that says, hey, we need Kaizen on the team?
So it scales. So the more developed and evolved the company is, the bigger it tends to be a marketing manager or SEO manager from that side. And then we work through down to founders and CEOs of companies where it's them and three other individuals. So at the top end, it tends to be marketing individuals. At the lower end, or smaller company size, I should say, it tends to be the founders. So it's a broad spectrum, really.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. How do these folks actually hear about Kaizen? Like, what is sort of the journey that they go through, or in other words, what are the top client acquisition channels that you guys are leveraging? How do you grow? How do they learn about Kaizen?
So we've been around 8 years now, and we've built up quite a reputation in particular spaces. In the digital PR space and SEO, we're really well known. So a lot of our inquiries through there come through inbound channels. So we're people that have seen a member of the team speak at a conference, or alternatively read some of the thought pieces we have on our site and they come in, or clients we have worked with recommend us to other marketing managers and they come in. And then we also actually do some outbound activity. It tends to target emerging services. So I mentioned our core products are digital PR and SEO, but we've also over the last year been launching paid media and influencer marketing. And our outbound efforts tend to establish us in those areas where people wouldn't have thought of us previously. And that tends to be the approach. So it splits according to needs and department size.
Very cool. It really sounds like sort of you even, applying your own strategies, the ones that you're providing to others for yourself, which is great to see. Say a lot of agencies don't necessarily find the time to do that. So that's fantastic that you guys are doing this. You mentioned inbound a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the website. Like how do you think about the website? Like what's the role of the website for Kaizen?
Well, we went through a rebranding exercise about 1.5 years, and it was quite dated. And we tried to think about that a lot in terms of how people engage with it. As much as I feel that we do follow what we preach to 70% of it, there's always 30% more that I'd like to improve it. But the key thing is to advertise our services and articulate our product and our why. So we spent a lot of time thinking about why we do what we do and how we can articulate that, as well as providing a rich stream of case studies, thought pieces. So we have a team that work on tests and other things we can do to share it that go up as white papers. So we try and make it as, I always want to try and move away from salesy as possible and try and focus on sharing knowledge, sharing insight, because that adds value to our peers or someone looking for it. But obviously we advertise our services on there. So we try and make it as much as possible the embodiment of what we want the company to be.
Yeah, makes a whole lot of sense. You talked a little bit sort of the room for improvement at 30%. Like, where do you as a leader from the company look at the website? When you look at the website, where do you actually see the room for improvement? Where do you want to sort of see it developing towards to?
It's like the mature strategy. So for example, we do email marketing, but it's not that mature in terms of tying people into engagement, following up. There's a lot more room. We don't do anything about trying to drive increased engagement in terms of actually on-page rates. So we don't use things like heat mapping. And once more, it comes to the point of what can we do with that time, and like, is it worth investing in that? But for our larger clients, obviously it makes sense when you have millions and millions of visitors, and if you drive in a 2% incremental conversion rate. For us, as a smaller thing, I don't think we're at that point, but it's always in my mind, and I'm always a little bit disappointed when you get 70% and not 100. But yeah.
Yep. No, it makes sense. Makes complete sense. I mean, we can stick a second on that before we go moving on, and maybe that is more true sort of to the clients that you guys are working with, because it's been a topic recently on the podcast where we speak about sort of figuring out why people do or do not convert on the website. Sort of when you guys are working, for example, with your clients, can you tell us a little bit about sort of what types of strategies, methods, technologies are you guys leveraging in order to figure out why people do or do not convert on the pages?
To be honest, most of our role is about acquisition of traffic, driving it there, and we have a few things more around that. But it's not something I've touched upon. Previously, we had a few projects where we had a client that wanted to drive more traffic, and we actually looked at their analytics, and we're like, well, you have a good volume of traffic for your market presence, and I would also encourage you, instead of focusing on that, to drive more engagement. So what our target was how can we drive 10 more seconds on the site for every user, or average across, and because the conversion rate from that jumped up considerably. So we use those types of strategies, but I don't really have an answer for your question.
That's fine. Makes sense. I mean, it really depends on where the agency is putting the focus, and it seems you're very much in the acquisition side of things. Very cool. Another topic actually that's been coming up that just comes to mind, that has been in the podcast discussed specifically in the last week very wildly, is sort of the idea of the cookieless future, right? How do you think about this? What do you see coming? What are your thoughts? I mean, marketers have been to varying degree of depth been sort of reading and thinking about this. What's your thoughts on that?
No, it's very interesting and frightening when you speak to the masses about it, because the impact is going to be huge. It feels like we've all been warmed up. So with all the GDPR consent of cookies, we saw a drop off there in terms of understanding, and it feels like it's a move to a more audience-based and holistic approach to understanding it. So I'm not too frightened in terms of client attribution, because Google's analytics models will always find a solution to whatever it is, and they're more well-placed to do that. But at the same point, it It has shifted, and we've been seeing a big impact from iOS update and the impact there in terms of performance. And I just think whatever happens, the market will evolve, but it does feel like it's going to be a challenge for the next sort of year or so to actually get around how to do it. But like an audience-based, value-driven approach to marketing is what's always best, and it's going to be the best regardless of whether you can track it, how you track it, and how you measure it.
And I mean, that ties maybe into the follow-up question is, what do you think currently marketers should do in order to be sort of prepared for what's coming, in regards to the cookieless future?
It'd be reading up in terms of your tech stack. So if your tech stack, seeing what solutions they're having in place for it. Also, essentially, we've been working with one of our clients to look at where they were previously and find ways to attribute that and understand it. So there are other things like Search Console, data that doesn't use cookies quite in the same way that will give you an insight, and then we've been attributing that forward. So it would be about benchmarking to understand where you were and what the impact could be, looking into your tech stack to understand what the solutions they're going to offer, and then just sort of planning and educating that outwards into your business so it doesn't come as a surprise.
Gotcha. What's your feel like? Do clients already, are they aware, or do you guys still have to educate them and say, hey, you know what, you actually have to be ready? Or do they come to you and say, you know what, actually we need analytics now, but cookieless? Or what is the?
It's a mix. Some of them very early in the journey, and just a lot of people are just waiting around for solutions to be formed from the big players, and then they're just going to follow suit with that. So some of them don't know anything about it, and you have to tell them about it. But the rest of them, they're just waiting for that, if I'm honest.
Makes sense. Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to learn a little bit more about you, Jeremy. So there is a whole lot of content out there, right? On growth marketing, on content marketing, on PR. Like, what are the places where you like to read, to hang out online, to learn more, get connected? I don't know, with peers in the industry. What's sort of your go-to places? Where do you feel you get quality content?
Sure. There's a couple that are quite channel specific. So Search Engine Watch, I read quite a lot of that for certain channels. Beyond that, there are talks and conferences that I tend to attend. So there's Price and SEO that I went to relatively recently. And if you can pick the right sort of speakers out there, you normally get a couple of nuggets. And then broader than that, I tend to read books, but mostly recently it's been because in the UK, we're currently seeing quite a lot of boom and need for it with lockdown and everything else. The demand's I've been focusing a lot of my time on culture. So reading a lot of David Rock's books around sort of the brain at work and things like that to try and understand, because the challenge for us is not client base currently, because that's accelerating at quite a ready rate from referrals, from trying to maintain our client. It's more about how can we sustain a team and culture around it, which is what I've been focusing on. And I feel, particularly with lockdown, remote working and everything else, has been one of the biggest challenges for us as a business and also in the wider industry.
What is maybe one or two things that you've learned now when you dived into culture? Like, what's something that found particularly important, that surprised you, maybe that typically you guys are not doing, or maybe one or two key insights that you took away?
So one of the key things is I've been trying to move to a model of learning that instead of having a top down, and this isn't revolutionary, instead of having a top down, this is what you learn, driving them to that question. And I've been spending a lot of time doing essentially progressive questioning, where rather than offer the solution and trying to train the team to do that, that has been quite beneficial, because people are only motivated and driven if they come to the answer themselves. So trying to build that into a team model has been challenging. And the other thing is I've just given a lot of it back. So we have loads of wealth of benefits, 30-day holiday, a grand education budget, all this stuff. And I've literally this year, with everything that's been happening, just given it back to them and go, what do you want? And that isn't revolutionary, but some of the stuff I've seen, particularly around getting people back into the office and engaging them, because people that we've hired solely remotely that no one ever met, they tended to feel isolated. And despite social events, you have 10 minutes to talk to someone. It's very difficult to build bonds. So we've been changing it now. So rather than in-office days be built around learning or training or some sort of company vision, we do something like a brunch before we start work to try and do it. So a lot of it's moved into what would they like to do rather than me as the leader, how I see it working.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. I want to wrap it up with some rapid fire questions as we're slowly approaching the end of the interview. Are you ready for those?
Yeah, of course.
What's the last book you read?
David Rock's Your Brain at Work. Very good.
What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Team benefits and retention. How can we improve the way the team feel about work?
If there would be no boundaries in tech, right? Everything is possible. What's the one thing you would fix for your role?
Forecasting. I hate it.
What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
We got broken into, the office got physically broken into over the weekend. So I was quite concerned about some of the technology and other things. Fortunately, they caught them, but at the same point, it's just, I was worrying about that.
That's definitely a very valid reason to worry. And very last question would be, right? And I would love to do a bit of time travel and go back with you to the days of the university, west of England, Bristol. If today would be sort of your last day of education, right? And you're heading off into the world of writing, marketing, I think you were in e-commerce as well, SEO. What's the one advice that you would give yourself?
I'd say apply myself. I had quite a varied, if you look at my educational background, I was quite varied up until I accidentally broke my leg. And then it was only then that this sort of fixed in a non-physical meant did I actually apply myself. And that was one of the things that drove my career. After that, it was fine. But until then, I was sort of just floating in the breeze.
Interesting. I mean, sometimes, it turns out for the better if some bad things happen. Really good. Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking the time with us today. I want to give you the very last word, right? If people would be forgetting all that we discussed about Kaizen today, what's the one thing that they should remember?
From a company perspective or from an individual perspective?
Give us both.
All right. Well, from a company, what would I like them to remember? That Kaizen we're an innovative digital marketing company. And from a personal perspective, it's always for people to care about what they do and apply themselves in whatever they're doing.
Jeremy, appreciate you taking time for the Platform Presents podcast.
Thank you.